I've been looking at my identity through the metaphor of a loom, with each part representing a different aspect of my identity, these being cultural, relational, and personal. A loom is a great way to represent these parts as they all work together to make a whole thing. I like the comparison that identity is a creative process, much like creating a weave. My loom is the collective and cultural identity, the world I interact with, and the places that I've lived. It is a crucial part of my identity as who I grew up with have influenced me. I grew up in regional Victoria, living in Moe and Bairnsdale, and moved to Melbourne when I was 20. I also briefly lived in Canada. I originally did not think being Australian or growing up in the country influenced who I was as a person. I remember seeing how Indigenous people had this deep connection to the land and see it as an extension of themselves. I did not think my cultural identity was that deep since moving around, I see that it has influenced me in my own ways. Living in Canada made me really see the difference in culture and identity compared to Australia. The same can be said for growing up in the country. After moving to Melbourne and seeing more diverse groups of people, growing up in rural Australia affected how I viewed myself and tried to present myself due to pervading stereotypes of how I should be. My metaphorical item would be my parents' garden. They have always had a giant garden that they built themselves, regardless of where we lived. I remember looking at photos of them gardening while I was overseas and looking at the plants that I couldn't grow in Canada and remembering my connection to Australia. This all sort of forms a groundwork of my identity as I can't weave the other aspects of it with only one thing. Oops. The warp would be my relational aspects of my identity, the people closest in my life that have influenced me. The warp is the support of my identity. It builds the foundation on the loom and allows me to build my personal identity and interact with my world. My most important relationship would be my family, in particular my parents. I am a single only child. My parents have always supported me, no matter what. When my world felt like it was collapsing and I didn't have anything, they were there to bring me back up. They are the foundation in my life and have influenced me in my beliefs and personality in many different ways. My metaphorical item would be my childhood stuffed toys, as many of them were given to me when I was a baby and passed down to me from my mum. They represent the long and important connection I have to my family that goes back years and years. The weft is my personal identity. It's experiences, interests, and personality and the ways I present myself to the world. The weft uh, is made up of lots of different materials that all tie together, much like the different aspects of my personality. I am a pre-service teacher, a cat lover, I love playing games, especially Pokemon, and I love drawing. These affect who I interact with and what I like to do in my spare time. The other part of my personal identity that I've only recently come to terms with is my gender identity. I came to terms with being transgender and no longer wanting to present as masculine anymore. This has greatly influenced how I view myself and one about the aspects of my personal identity. From my classes reading, I really resonated with the idea of my identity being fluid and constantly changing based on the experiences. I grew up in an area where every guy was expected to be masculine and not to diverge from that. I've always tried to be that kind of person, be someone who I am not. It was only after moving away and from there, and with the support of my parents, I was able to come to terms with my identity and be more comfortable with who I am. I'm still myself and I can continue to weave through my experiences in the world and enjoy the things I love with the support of my warp. I feel the best metaphor for my personal identity would be my tattoos, as they represent how I would like people to view me, my personality, and how I've changed as a person. A tattoo on my left arm was done before I came to terms with who I was and represent who I was trying to be. The ones on my right are the ones when I started to come to terms with who I was as a person and wanted to be. Who I want to be and how I want others to see myself. Much like my identity, the style of my tattoos are fluid and changing based on who I want to be and how I want to be seen. How this all ties together, as mentioned, the aspects of my identity are all unique and influence and support each other to create my weave. This is who I am as a person. All these aspects of my identity influence each other and cannot exist independently of each other. If one of them disappears, the whole thing falls apart, and each support each other and form a whole thing. There are mistakes that I've made, but it's important to learn from them as a part of life and need to make more decisions based on them. These all form together to all our ways form together and how we interact with each other as a society. Stop.